Welcome back. All right, so at the start of this, I want to just address a couple of things I've seen on the comment section for the Tampa Bay video from yesterday. First off, award winners, I'm not getting into with each team's history. I will do award-winning videos during the summer, so I'll look at each award, I'll look at its history. I've done that before as well, but I think it's always a good time to do an updated look at each history of the awards, which team wins awards most often, is there an East Coast bias, all this fun stuff to talk about. And for the team history videos, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. But Detroit is the team for today. This is an original 6 team, so obviously there's more to this than with Tampa Bay yesterday, a team that came into the league in 1992. So they used players they purchased from the Victoria Cougars as an expansion team. So the Victoria Cougars go under, and so the Detroit Cougars are founded in 1926 and joined the National Hockey League. They did not start out as the Detroit Red Wings. They were that until 1930, changed their name to the Falcons from 1930 till 1932. And then I believe it was James Norris that said, hey, so we want to, attract the car building crowd, and he changed the name to the Red Wings. That logo was born. It was different than it is now. You can see the difference here in this one. This is my Gordie Howe jersey. So the logo has been different, mild, small differences. But yeah, so for the Detroit Red Wings, it's been a nice long run as the Detroit Red Wings. But they did start out as the Cougars, Falcons. And so for this upcoming reverse retro, they could do a throwback to the Cougars or the Falcons. Don't be scared. So their all-time points leader is Gordie Howe. Gordie Howe, like I said, I've got the number right here, the jersey right here. 1,687 games played with Detroit. Sadly, didn't play his entire career in Detroit. Ends up going over to the WHA and then comes back to play for Hartford the final year of his career. 786 goals, 1,023 assists, 1,809 points. And at the time he went to the WHA, he was seen as the best player in the history of the game. And there are those who will still argue that he was the best player in the history of the game, that it's not all about points. Steve Yzerman, 1,514 points scored, or 1,514 games played. He had more points than that. 692 goals, 1,063 assists, 1,755 points. So if Yzerman had been able to play a little bit more, he probably would have passed Gordie Howe on the all-time points list, but he's close. Alex Delvecchio's next on the list with 1,550 games played, 456 goals, 825 assists, 1,281 points. So for guys currently on the team, you've got a long way to go to get onto this list. Nick Lidstrom's next with 1,564 games played, 264 goals, 878 assists, 1,142 points. So the top 4 guys on the points list have all played a minimum of 1,514 games with the team, Yzerman being that 4th guy. Then Zetterberg, who only played 1,082 games with Detroit, 337 goals, 623 assists, 960 points. And he was overlooked for the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame announcement being made on Monday, Zetterberg's name not being in there. I do expect Zetterberg to get into the Hall of Fame. Sergei Fedorov, 908 games played with the Wings, 400 goals, 554 assists, 954 points. And at his peak, he was the best all-around player in the National Hockey League. 200-foot center, he could score 100 points if he wanted to, and his defense was fantastic to the point where Scotty Bowman used him on the point. So what we see now with 3 or 4 forwards and a defenseman, back then Detroit just had Fedorov on the blue line at times. Datsuk, 953 games played with Detroit, 314 goals, 604 assists, 918 points, and arguably the best two-way center in the game over, I'll say, the last 20 years. This is where people would be yelling and screaming about Bergeron, but I can't hear you because you're yelling at a computer screen. This is a recorded video. It's not live. There's no back and forth. Norm Ullman, 875 games, 324 goals, 434 assists, 758 points. Nice long career for Ullman. Ted Lindsay, 862 games, 335 goals, 393 assists, 728 points before he was traded. He was traded because he wanted to put together the NHL Players Association, and because he was trying to unionize the players, they punished him by getting him traded. I believe it was to Chicago. So yeah, it's interesting to see that a player being traded was considered punishment at the time. And yet with Detroit in the late 70s, being traded to Detroit was seen as a punishment. that would get fixed in the early 80s. We'll get to that. Brendan Shanahan, 716 games played with Detroit, 309 goals, 324 assists, 633 points. 633 is the target for guys currently on the roster like Larkin, Bertuzzi, guys who, if they stick around long enough, they might make the top 10, but it is tough to make the top 10 scoring list for your original 6 teams. Wins leaders, though. Terry Sawchuk is still the wins leader, 350 wins for him. Chris Osgood, 317 wins. Osgood's name gets mentioned too as a guy who gets overlooked for Hall of Fame induction. I do not disagree. I've already done a video on Chris Osgood. I've made the argument for Osgood to the Hall of Fame before. I don't know that he ever gets there, but in my opinion, he should be there. Jimmy Howard, 246 wins for him for 3rd place all time. Harry Lumley, 163. And then Roger Crozier with 131. So any upcoming goaltenders, if Nedeljkovic sticks around long enough, 131 is the target to reach the top 5 in the all-time wins. Retired numbers, they've got 8 of them. Number 1, Terry Sawchuk. Number 4 for Red Kelly. Number 5 for Nicholas Lidstrom. Number 7 for Ted Lindsay. Number 9 for Gordie Howe. Number 10 for Alex Delvecchio. So 1, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10. So this is why you don't see very many guys in Detroit with single numbers on their jerseys. Number 12, Sid Abel, and number 19 for Steve Yzerman. So all 8 of those are in the 1 through 19 range. There's going to be a lot of guys in Detroit with numbers that are 20 and higher because those are the ones that are available. Now, their playoffs since 2000. This gets kind of extensive as well. 2000, they lose in the second round against Colorado in 5. That was the rivalry, of course, and that was at the tail end of the rivalry that began in 96. 2001, they lose in the first round in 6 against LA. That was a shocker. And they made up for that by winning the Stanley Cup in 2002 with arguably one of the most talented deep rosters of any Stanley Cup winner. 2003, they lost in the first round in 4 straight against Anaheim. So defending Stanley Cup champions swept in the first round. 2004, they lost in 6 in round 2 against the Calgary Flames. 2006, they lost in the first round, also in 6 games against Edmonton. So this is where you're back to seeing Detroit being upset in the first round or second round often. And it was a problem they had before the 97 Cup win that led to them being called the Detroit Dead Things. And it's called the Dead Things era. 2007, they lost in the conference final in 6 games against the Anaheim Ducks. And then in 2008, they win what to date is their most recent Stanley Cup. So that's what Steve Yzerman's goal is to get them back to that glory. 2009, they did reach the final, but they lost in 7 games against Pittsburgh. 2010, they reached the second round where they lose in 5 against the San Jose Sharks. 2011, they lost in the second round again in 7 games with San Jose. And this is right around where the discussion becomes one of whether or not Detroit is mortgaging its future just to try to make the playoffs. Spoiler alert, they were. And does that cause more damage later on? Well, they've been in a rebuild for a long while now. And so I would say, yes, probably does cause some damage to them. 2012, they lost in the first round in 5 against Nashville. 2013, they lose in 7 in the second round against Chicago. 2014, they lost in 5 games in the first round against Boston as they switched over to the East. 2015, they lose in 7, again in the first round against Tampa. And then in 2016, they met Tampa again. It didn't get better. They lost in 5 games against Tampa in 2016. So they have not been in the playoffs since 2016. They're looking to get back in 2023. It's been a long, long dry spell for them when it comes to playoffs. Their cup years, they've got a bunch. They've got 11. 1936, 1937, 1943, 1950, and 1955. A very strong era that did include the play of Gordie Howe. And then there's a long dry spell until 1997, so 42 years between cups. They get it in 97, they get it again in 98, they get it in 2002, and then they get the cup again in 2008 before coming up 1 game short in 2009. Now, the arena they've played in 3 different ones according to the research I did. The Olympia from 1928 till 1929. Well, they had an arena prior to the Olympia, but the Olympia is the one that's remembered here. From 1928 through to 1979. Then they moved to Joe Louis in 1979. That lasted till 2017, when it became Little Caesars Arena from 2017 until now. Mike Ilitch, of course, helping to get that put in place, and he bought the team in 1982. The Detroit Red Wings were not a place that players wanted to go until Ilitch took over. Ilitch changed the culture. The winning started in the late 80s for the Detroit Red Wings, and they just kept building. And of course, they had this really, really great era that goes through the late 90s into the early 2000s. And now we're waiting for them to get back to that yet again. Their coaching history, they've had 27 coaches to this point. They will name their 28th coach soon. Their first coach was Art Duncan. He coached 33 games back in 1926-27. His 10-21-2 record meant he got replaced. Duke Keats takes over from him for the final 11 games, and they went 2-7-2 over those final 11. So they got worse after changing coaches. Jeff Blashill, of course, the most recent coach, 537 games behind the bench for him. A record of 204 for wins, 261 regulation losses, and 72 losses in overtime or shootouts. The first goal in the history of the franchise, which would have been the Detroit Cougars, was actually Harold Halderson in their second ever game. Their first game they got shut out. Scored at 19:54 of the third period. So it was almost the end of the second game before they got their first goal. They lost that game 4-1 against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Yes, there was a Pittsburgh Pirates in the National Hockey League. No, they didn't last very long. And it's an interesting story on that one as well. But for this video, Harold Halderson gets the first ever goal in the team's history. The most recent goal in this team's history, Tyler Bertuzzi at 19:50 of the third period in a 5-3 win over the Devils. That was an empty net goal for Bertuzzi. So nice long stretch between the first goal in the team's history and now. All-time penalty minutes leader is Bob Probert with 2,090. I think that's safe. I think that's really, really safe in Detroit's record book. Now, their season records, Yzerman. Great year for him in 88-89. This was before he really became the player that he would need to be for them to win the cup. When they started winning cups, part of it was that it wasn't about personal point totals. But 88-89, he had a great year. 65 goals, all-time high. 90 assists, all-time high for the Red Wings, and 155 points. So absolutely remarkable year for Yzerman, a player who, again, when they start winning Stanley Cups, he was not a 2-point-per-game type guy, but his game was better. He was a better player all around. The penalty minutes, we get back to Bob Probert, his season high of 398 and 87-88. I'm going to go ahead and say 398 penalty minutes in a season. That's pretty safe. I think it would take a lot. I think you'd have to do a lot to get to 398 penalty minutes in today's National Hockey League, where it's rare for a guy to get 100. Where if a player gets 2 penalties in the same game, we go, man, he took some bad penalties there. It's a different era. Your wins all time in a season, Terry Sawchuk had 44 wins in both the 1950-51 season and the 1951-52 season as well. So Sawchuk, the overall numbers, still the best goaltender in the team's history, or is it Chris Osgood? I will go ahead and say Sawchuk, but I would understand why people would feel differently about it. So their best draft picks, and again, I was just looking through like where guys get drafted and how many points they put up. Drafted 53rd overall in 1989 was Nicholas Lidstrom, pretty good draft pick. And that same year, drafted number 74 was Sergei Fedorov. Now again, needs to be a bit of an asterisk that before the Iron Curtain fell, there wasn't really a feeling that a lot of these young Russian players were going to see any time in the National Hockey League, which is why Fedorov would have been available there. I'm a little bit surprised that the Canucks didn't pick up Fedorov since they had drafted Bure, but anyways, Fedorov ends up being drafted by the Detroit Red Wings. Smart pick, late pick for them. Number 210 in 1999 is Henrik Zetterberg. Number 257 in 1984 was Thomas Holmstrom. Number 171 in 1998 is Pavel Datsyuk. And in 2008, the number 121 pick was Gustav Nyquist. In 1989, Vlad Konstantinov is drafted 221st overall. So again, that's 1989. Detroit was ahead of the curve when it came to drafting Russian players. And I did go and correct myself. It's 1994 for Thomas Holmstrom. He wasn't that old when he won his last Stanley Cup. So, during the 90s and late 80s, some excellent scouting. And really, it's a matter of European scouting for Detroit was ahead of everybody else. Now, the National Hockey League, it feels like everybody has European scouts. Everybody's aware of the European players a little bit more because of what Detroit was able to do. When you have a team that's winning a lot and you're not getting those top draft picks, you've got to get creative. And so for them, it was Europe. Now, first round picks that have played less than 100 games. This is again only looking at players who I'm pretty sure aren't going to get past 100 games, not looking at first round picks that haven't played yet who were drafted very recently. So 1973, drafted 11th overall, was Terry Richardson. He played 20 games in the National Hockey League. 1976, drafted 4th overall, was Fred Williams. He played 44 games in the NHL. 1994, Jan Golubovsky, drafted 23rd overall. He would play 56 games. So not even in the era where we're talking about how great Detroit's drafting was, they still had misses because every team does. 1996, drafted 26th overall, was Jesse Wallin. He plays 49 games in the NHL. Also in 2008, drafted 30th overall, was Thomas McCallum, who played 3 games for them as a goaltender, and that was it for him. No games played. There's some here because, again, it's an original 6 teams. So there's a lot of draft picks. Dating back to 1964, Claude Gauthier was their number one pick overall. Doesn't play. 1965, George Forgy is drafted 3rd overall in 1965. George Forgy sounds totally like a made-up EA Sports game. I'm pretty sure that's what happened in 1965. Something with a time machine in Doctor Who. Anyways, 1967, drafted 9th overall, was Ron Barkwell. Ron Barkwell sounds very... I don't know. It just sounds like he should be a billionaire. That's the Barkwell manner. So, number 11 in 1968 was Steve Ondresic. Doesn't play in the NHL. So in the 60s, the draft had a lot of misses. The draft was nowhere near as important or scouted and all this as it is now. 1988, drafted 17th overall, was Corey Koser. And in 1992, drafted 22nd overall, Curtis Bowen. So again, even though the drafting and the scouting were excellent, there were still misses that occurred along the way. So there you go. Just again, as far as it goes with Detroit, it kind of has to be an overview because we're already up to over 17 minutes. And the deep dive into everything historical will take place during the summer. Anyways, like I said, the trophies I'll look at as well. And we'll get into which organizations have had the most trophy winners, which ones haven't. And again, the East Coast bias comment comes up a lot, so we can discuss that too as the summer goes along. But there you go. History of the Detroit Red Wings. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.